Hello and welcome back to Let's Play Jane's Fighters Anthology as we continue with the Egyptian Campaign Aircraft Showcase. So today we will be going over the F-5, specifically the F-5E variant used in this campaign, but you know, we'll discuss the history leading up to it. So let's set up our mission here. Desert, 20,000 feet, clear, neutral. We'll say 20 miles, custom loadout. We'll go up against, Mirage 3, sound good. And then I don't think we'd have enough payload to do a ground target, so this will just be a air-to-air duel. Yeah. So you can see they have the AIM-7 Sparrow and AIM-9B. I will... Now I think by this time Egypt would have at least had AIM-9L Sidewinder, so I think I'm going to swap those. But other than that, it looks good, so let's start. Wait. I don't think that's right. Whatever. Alright, throttle up. So the F-5 was developed in... Oh, we actually have way better radar range than we should, I think. So it was first developed in the 1950s by Northrop Grumman, kind of as a private venture, but also in requirement to a U.S. Navy requirement for a jet fighter that could operate from escort carriers, but that requirement was dropped when the Navy retired all its escort carriers. So Northrop Grumman decided to continue on with the design of the fighter, at that time internally called the N-156, and the goal for this project was a light, cheap, reliable, high-performance fighter, kind of like an American version of the MiG-21.
I'm taking a shot.
So the project eventually diverged into trainer and fighter variants with the N-156T trainer, and that was actually selected by the Air Force for their trainer program, and that ended up becoming... Oh, our Sparrows are not doing well.
Splash 1, Mirage 3.
Oh.
Mirage 3. I'm taking a shot.
Alright. Cut that turn a little close, but we can just get right back into it. But
Contact, you're 12 o'clock.
yeah, so the Air Force selected it as the M156T as the basis for their trainer, and that contract was awarded in July 1956, and that became what's currently known as the T-38 Talon. First flew in June 12th, 1959, and when production ended in January of 1972, there was 1,158 produced. And that's actually currently being replaced now by the new next generation trainer program. I think they selected the... I want to say it was the Boeing entry, but I can't quite recall. So the N-156F, which was the fighter variant, continued as a low priority private venture until February 25th, 1958, when the prototypes were ordered for a prospective low-cost fighter for the Military Assistance Program.
Splash 1.
Now
Mirage
the
3. Missile launch. Missile launch.
yeah,
Missile launch. Missile
our
launch.
Sparrows
Fire.
just
Missile.
suck.
I'm taking a shot. Missile launch. Get this
I was gonna
fire.
say, if he
Missile.
kamikaze me again,
Splash 1. Mirage 3. Fox 1. I'm taking a shot. At your 11 o'clock. Turning left. Fox 1. Splash 1. Mirage 3. Missile launch. Firing. Missile. I'm taking damage.
woo,
Splash 1.
got it.
Mirage
And that's it. So, when you aren't being kamikaze, the F-5 actually compares pretty favorably with the Mirage 3, which is roughly of the same era. And we did have external fuel tanks to boot, so we'll just head over to the Israeli airbase that isn't ours, but the game says is ours. The first N-156F flew at Edwards Air Force Base on July 30th, 1999. And it performed pretty favorably, actually, to the F-100 Super Sabre, but there weren't any orders that came of it. In 1961, the Army tested the F-5, the A-4, and the Fiat G91 for, observation ground attack. But, legal issues prevented them from, they liked the F-5, but legal issues prevented them from pursuing any of the aircraft because, legally, the Air Force is responsible for fixed-wing aircraft operation from land. So, and the Army was trying to procure its own thing because the Air Force sometimes doesn't do a great job of helping the other services. That's why there's that big fiasco with the A-10 Thunderbolt, where the Air Force wants to get rid of it so they can focus on their high-performance fighters, but the Army loves it, and the Marines love it. So, the Army wants to try to get it, but legally they can't, and yeah, it's a mess. But, in 1962, under President Kennedy, the low-cost export fighter program was revived. And so the N-156 handily won that competition, which happened April 23rd, 1962. And it received the official designation of the F-5E Freedom Fighter. And production started in October of that year. Wow, we are coming in real fast. And a total of 624 F-5As were produced when production ended. Okay, now we're not coming in fast enough. When production ended in 1972, along with 200 F-5B trainer variants, which ditched the cannons for the second seat, and 86 RF-5A, which ditched the cannons for camera nose. Canadair also built 240 F-5As and Bs under license, and Casa Spain also built another 70. In 1970, Northrop Grumman won a contract to upgrade the F-5 to make it superior to the MiG-21 that was then encountered in Vietnam, and this was part of the International Fighter Aircraft Competition. So, as a result, the F-5E Tiger II variant was developed, which has more powerful General Electric J8521s. The original used General Electric J25 engines, which were actually originally used for the AQM-20 Quail, which is, I believe that's a decoy launch from B-52s that are on the strategic nuclear mission, but I'd have to check into that to be sure. In addition to that, the F-5E also had a lengthened and enlarged fuselage, which held more fuel and more room for avionics and upgrades, enlarged leading-edge extensions, which helped with its maneuverability, and more sophisticated avionics, including a radar, an Emerson Electric AN/APQ-153. And the F-5E first flew in August 11th, 1972, with the trainer variant, the F-5F, falling on September 25th, 1974. Now, the F-5F had one less cannon to fit a second seat, as opposed to dropping all the cannons It also had a modified radar, an Emerson AN APQ-157, which was mostly the same as the one on the F-5E, but it was optimized for two-seat control. The first F-5E was delivered to the 425th Tactical Fighter Squadron at Williams Air Force Base on April 6, 1973. And a recon variant was also developed, exchanging the radar and the cannon for a sensor package, and that was known as the RF-5E Tiger Eye. Now, 792 F-5Es and another 146 F-5S as well as 12 RF-5Es were built by Northrop Grumman when production ended, not including another 91 F-5Es and S built under license in Switzerland, and another 68 built by Korean Air in South Korea, and 308 built in Taiwan. The F-5E variant was eventually developed into what was originally called the F-5G and ultimately morphed into the F-20 Tiger Shark, but that program unfortunately failed when Reagan lifted some of the export restrictions on top-of-the-line U.S. military hardware, which allowed the F-16 to be exported, which unfortunately was superior enough in performance to the F-5G and had enough room for growth that the F-16A won all the export orders that the F-20 was hoping to accomplish. The F-5E was upgraded numerous times by numerous nations, oftentimes with the upgrades focusing on the radar and avionics, so you can find quite a few differences between the F-5s of each nation as they pursued their own indigenous upgrade program, and it's Northrop slowly stopped supporting it. Now, modified F-5A... Well, here's the thing. For American fighter, the F-5 didn't actually see a lot of service with the U.S. The Air Force only, and I think the Navy also used it for a while for dissimilar air combat training. Basically, as aircraft for their aggressor squadrons that pilots train against. And then a couple F-5As were modified and became the F-5C, and they saw limited action with the United States in the Vietnam War, mostly performing ground strikes, although this was seen by most as an attempt to basically advertise the aircraft for sale to South Vietnam. And the F-5 really is America's MiG-21 because it was a very successful export program, despite, I mentioned earlier in the while we were doing the French fighters that if a company develops anything, a fighter or a weapon, a tank, but it's not adopted by that country's military, it tends to not do well in export. But despite the F-5 not being really adopted much by the U.S., the F-5 did extremely well in the export market. I mean, you can see across all variants, or maybe 1,000, 1,500 built, which granted is small compared to the 20,000 or so MiG-21s that were built, I think, if I've got that number right. But they managed to get export orders to Austria, Bahrain, Botswana, Brazil, Canada, Chile, Ethiopia, Greece, Honduras, Indonesia, Iran, Jordan, Kenya, South Korea, Libya, Mexico, Morocco, Malaysia, the Netherlands, Norway, the Philippines, Saudi Arabia, Singapore, South Vietnam, Spain, Sudan, Switzerland, Taiwan, Thailand, Tunisia, Turkey, Venezuela, and Yemen. And also several F-5s were obtained by the Soviet Union and North Vietnam, predominantly after the fall of South Vietnam, which operated the type, as well as after the regime changes in Iran and in Ethiopia, where they had previously saw service in the Ogaden War, where they competed quite favorably against the MiG-21s they went up against. And so in South Vietnamese service, they saw service in the Vietnam War. In Iranian service, they saw service in the Iran-Iraq War. And then they also saw forget. It was an African country that used it in Operation Linda Nietzsche, which basically was bombing terrorists in Somalia, I think. They also saw a little bit of action in the failed 1992 Moroccan coup attempt, and they are actually used by the Saudis a little bit and Bahrain in the Gulf War. And today, they still are operated by a couple of countries. Switzerland has been trying to replace them forever, I think. Same with Brazil. Mexico, I think, still operates the type. And Thailand, either they still operate it or they just retired it. I can't remember which. And on top of all that, it's been used by NASA for, various NASA tests. It's currently operated by there's some private companies that, buy these surplus old military aircraft like Mirage 3 or the F-5, and then they provide training services to air forces around the globe. I believe there's one based in Texas that operates the F-5. I think it's Texas, but I'm not entirely sure. And the F-5 also became the basis for a couple of other designs, like the X-31, is it? Or the X-30? Yeah, the X-31 EFM that we talked about earlier in this playthrough. So it was a very successful fighter that ended up being... it ended up falling out of disuse because it wasn't advanced enough, basically, to compete with the F-16. But for its time, it did really well. And with that, I think we'll end this mission. Alright, so that's a brief breakdown of the F-5E. I hope you all enjoyed that. Next time, I think we'll be doing our final showcase, which is, it's going to be an abridged showcase, because we'll fly the F-16A for the Egyptians just to get an idea of the loadout, but since I already covered the F-16 in the Ukrainian campaign, I'm not going to read that off again. But we'll get a feel for how it's different from the F-16, and with that, after that, then we'll move on to those single missions that I missed, that I ended up finding. So with that, thank you all for watching, and stay tuned for next time, and we'll see you then.